Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Executive Table Talk. My name is JT O'Donnell. I'm the founder and CEO of Work It Daily. And today we're going to be talking with an outstanding group of executives from diverse industries on the subject of team and business planning. So at the time that we're recording this, it's coming to the end of 2022, and it means we need to start thinking about our planning for 2023. But, this isn't your normal time, is it, folks? This is us coming off a pandemic. There's been a lot of change. There's a lot of restructuring going on. So I thought it really made sense to bring in some pros and talk about this idea of business planning, team planning, goal setting, all the things that we need to be doing and how we need to pay attention to it. So with that in mind, let me bring my slides up so I can get the party started. Welcome, Michael, Anna, Lisa, John, and Mark. Good to have you all here. I'm going to get right into it. I'm going to pick on Michael first because Michael, I loved what you shared about this idea of employees knowing three things: mission, goals, and competitors. Can you share a little bit about that mentality and why you think it's so important that they need to know that in order to do good business and goal setting?
Yes, our leaders at the top set these goals and missions every year, and of course our competitors may change, but I think it's very important as teams and even as individuals as we work, we align our work and our team goal setting to the mission, the goals, and the competitors. And when I say competitors, I mean the current competitors, future competitors, and new market entrants. So we need to be aware of what's around us, what's going on, but we need to definitely align ourselves with the goals of the company and the mission, and also our competitors.
I love that because I think you're right. Oftentimes it comes down that the goals are set for the year from way up high, but maybe the team itself doesn't acutely understand the mission of the company and how that ties to the goals and to the competitors. And I really like that. Oftentimes you don't hear people thinking about the competitors when they're setting the goals. They're just sort of thinking about their own mission. So it's fantastic stuff. And that actually leads into Lisa. You talked about the need for analyzing past performance. So let's talk a little bit about that and why it's so important.
Yeah, before you start developing your goals, this is the time to really take a hard look at how your business has performed in the last year before you kick off that goal setting. And you want to determine the health of your business. And you want to take a look and work across the organization and pull reports, pull the sales reports, pull the financial reports, the customer reports, do a full SWOT analysis, and be critical. Take a look at what worked, what didn't work, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, so that you can really then go forward and identify those goals that are going to drive the organization to the next level. And you can be very prepared with your eyes open in terms of what's going to work, where you can drive the organization, and what the landscape looks like internally, and you can be prepared for the external threats and opportunities outside of your organization because you've done the work internally.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned a SWOT analysis and looking at that, because I think people can be sometimes emotional about things that were, tie themselves to things that were successful, or things that weren't successful, and it can impact how they're doing that goal setting, that planning. So I think, like you said, having all of that information before you set the goals means you can be more realistic, which is huge. And that's somewhat similar, John, to what you shared, which was having the team review the performance data, right? So it's not just, hey, I'm the manager, I'm looking at the data and I'm making the decisions, but getting the whole team involved in what the data means. Can you talk more about that? Ooh, we can't hear you, John.
Oh, sorry about that. I'm in a building with spotty reception, so hopefully you can hear me.
But good.
Yeah, but if we want to establish organizations that have distributed opportunities for everyone, regardless of where they are in the hierarchy, involve our teams in looking at data and then suggesting that with, well, what do we do with this data? What does this data mean for our community? Nonprofit field where that is particularly important, that all states say in what the organization's vision and mission is. But I think there's relevance for for-profit companies as well, that we really want to vest people where our organization is in terms of what is the data saying about health, and moving that forward. So you can almost think of it as, what is the data telling us important, and what are our next steps?
Yeah, I'm with you. You know, it's true. In nonprofit, it might be more inclusive, but I think in the for-profit world, if we're going to get buy-in, if we're going to get people to do what we want them to do and reach those goals, they definitely need to be part of that process. So I agree with you there. And then that leads into the last piece, Mark, or sorry, Anna. I almost skipped someone. Which is, if you're going to set goals, why not use the process that I don't want to say standardize, and I hope you can expand on it, but I would say it's become very popular, the concept of OKRs. So can you talk a little bit about that and why you think so many companies are adopting them?
Absolutely, JT. You know, these objectives and key results framework, or OKRs, has become one of the most popular frameworks for teams, not individuals, but for teams that are looking to really plan and especially measure the success of their work. It starts from the leaders at each level of the organization, starting to define, very qualitative, big inspirational goals that are called objectives, right? And then they define who will be the user or the consumer of the team's work, and determine what behavioral changes they would expect to see in these consumers or these users that could be used to quantify whether the team is really achieving their high-level goals. And these quantifiable outcomes are what's called the key results. This is probably one of the most interesting things that connects or brings this type of framework, to being one of the most popular, because it really talks about, not only keeping the planning and progress tracking focused on the impact of the work, rather than on micromanaging the specific work of the teams that are doing on a day-to-day basis. So it hits both marks, changing those behaviors and making sure that the individual team members are really achieving something that is going to impact across the board the consumers and the high-level goals of the organization.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's neat that it's all planned in advance, the objectives and the key results, so that, if you can tie, the overall goal along with how we're going to know it's been done successfully. I think not a lot of companies are doing that as thoroughly as they could, which I think is wonderful. But that leads into the wrong goal setting, the wrong planning. So Mark, I found your take really interesting here, because you said it's reasonable to assume that the tsunamis of work pushed our way in 2022 is going to continue in 2023. I would agree with you completely. I think it's going to continue. Companies are pushing to get more. They're trying to play catch up. They're restructuring. But you talked about setting goals and planning will be ineffective, the equivalent of holding one's hand up against incoming tidal waves. So let's talk about that a little bit. What do you mean by that? And what do you think people should do instead?
Yeah, like you said, right, I think that I don't know about everybody else, but there was like a huge slew of work came across my desk in 2022, and it's not going to change. So setting goals and planning feels like the right thing to do, but I'm just not sure that it's actually effective in being as agile as it needs to be. So absolutely, why do we plan? Well, I've got a number of things to do, and I don't have enough time to do all of them, and therefore I need to plan. Well, maybe an alternative to that is actually what I call self-prioritization, right? So rather than having this kind of longer term planning horizon, this is what I'm going to do in the next year, it's more of a day-to-day art in terms of, what's important today, and am I ahead of that today, even if being ahead of it is simply one step. So rather than plan, you self-prioritize. You plan, but you do it on a day-to-day basis, right? Or maybe a week-to-week basis at most. And then in terms of goal setting, again, rather than a goal, to me, it just seems like a longer-term thing. And again, I think that there's just so much happening that longer-term doesn't work anymore. But absolutely, focusing upon the tasks that need to get done today. If you do that for however many business days there are in a year, what is that, 200, 220? then by the end of the year, you will have hit some significant goals. So again, I think it's yes, it's planning and goal setting, but it's doing it over that time horizon that actually makes sense these days. And that becomes, self-prioritization day to day, and just hit those tasks. You've got something to do, you make sure you hit the date, you make sure that the quality of what you deliver is high, and you'll ultimately kind of live to fight another day. You get to do it all again in 2024.
I think it's so funny you say that. I think that we set, at my company, we set goals every year. I would argue every time we look back, where we started and where we ended up are always two different things. But I think some of that has to do with the size of the company that we are. I think startups and smaller companies, late stage startups, they have to pivot all the time. I tell my team regularly that we have a constant list of what we call planned neglect, meaning there are some intentional things that we just can't get to. And, we constantly go back to that list and see if we need to reprioritize, like you said. So I do think it's a fluid process. What I think is interesting, though, is that at much bigger companies, they have to make decisions that they then have to stick with and exercise through, right? And Lisa, I see you nodding, and I want to jump to you. You've been in CPG, you've been in big companies. They don't get to just, scrap it one quarter in if it isn't flying, right? So talk us through a little bit about like goal setting in the past for you. What happens when you see 6 months in, we're not on track? What's it like in the big biz?
Well, I think, Mark, you hit it dead on. The prioritization is the key to all of this. You can set goals, but if you're not aligned from a prioritization standpoint, even within your department, let alone the organization, I can go to Jane and say, this is urgent, let's move forward. And Jane's like, well, that's not on my priority list. And you're disconnected, and you all aren't moving in the same direction as a company. And, the thing that Anna mentioned with the OKRs, that they are really powerful if you all are aligned. If from the CEO down is setting that, and you all are aligned, and you all are moving in the same direction, and you're prioritized, and you're saying, we're going to move forward, and this is our focus, and you're reevaluating it on a constant basis. I will say, I heard something recently, and it's really powerful what this person said. We've got to get some quick wins. Great, let's do it. But when you dissect that, what does quick mean? Is that in the next week? Is that in the next month? Is that in the next quarter? What does that mean? And what does a win mean?
Yeah.
Is that a sales? Is that, what does that, because a win could mean is, I just got to get through my project list. But that doesn't mean it's going to move the company forward that's failing. You're getting all these layoffs, right? So for me, I could say, gosh, I got through my project list. I won. But that does not mean that the company is driving sales and driving profitability, and you've got a disconnect, right? So you all have to be very focused in the company from priority and a goal setting, and you have to figure that out. And if you're not aligned, it is a complete miss. Yeah. And that is so hard to do. I can't even tell you, it is the most painful thing in an organization to prioritize and be very, very focused and constantly make sure you've got your goals and you are all aligned. It is the hardest thing to do.
Well, and isn't it true? We set these goals based on some assumptions, which you all talked about today, doing your research, analyzing the data, getting people's buy-in, right? So we make the plan, and then what? Life happens. Unexpected curveballs hit throughout the year, stuff that you couldn't have possibly factor into your plan, right? So, I remember one time building P&Ls. It was my first time, and I was with this CEO, and I said, well, why are we doing this if we know it's not going to match up? She said, because you need something. You need to at least have some kind of thing to work towards. No one's going to hold you to this to the letter. Doesn't mean throw it out, but you've got to have something that you're working towards, which I think is interesting. And that makes me think about your work, Anna. You do a lot of coaching of executives and talking them through that. And I'm curious, when you are talking to executives, what do you think holds them back from doing good business planning and goal setting from a personal standpoint? Do you see what I'm saying? On their own level.
Yeah, I think that it connects really nicely to comments that Mark, Liz, and Michael have mentioned, which is that prioritization and really knowing, most probably, from a coaching perspective and a leader, knowing who do you have in the boss, who do you have in your team, really understanding what their strengths are. Really, it's a duality. When you work on a day-to-day basis, it's two areas as a leader that you have to work on. One is developing your team, your individual team members, to whatever specifically they need to. That's one big task, one big goal that any leader should have. In my perspective, that's the number one thing. And then, matched to that is, how do you make sure that you are the one negotiating and reprioritizing and not just accepting every single goal that upper management or super senior management brings down to you? It's a very important role that you have to have as a leader, to have that negotiation and that influential role. And that means that you have to know what's going on. And therefore, the OKRs works very, very nicely. You have the pulse of what's going on. And to Lisa's point, it's not simple. It is not simple by any stretch. But if you do it together, it's probably gonna work much better. But it's those two things. So focusing on your team members and their strengths, and making sure that you are the broker of prioritization with upper management.
Yeah, I love it. All right, we're going to grab a question here from Melody. How do you help teams prioritize so they can get to critical goals? Michael, I'm going to ask you, you spent time at the NFL, right?
Yes.
At the NFL, was there anything formally structured in terms of goal setting? And how did that come about?
Yes, we did a lot of trend analysis there. We look at last year versus this year. We did a lot of looking at trends, and I think trends are very, very important. Pacing, how are we pacing last year to this year? We did a lot of forecasting also. For me, I think the budget is a living, breathing thing. Some people do a budget and they file it in the drawer and they don't look at it the rest of the year. I think a budget should be looked at month to month. I mean, because what I do with the budget is I calendarize the budget. I take a 12-month budget and I say, now some things like rent, okay, you're spending the same amount of rent every month, but some things are a little more wobbly. Let's say with, you mentioned, JT, about the weather being, maybe you don't have a bad winter, so maybe you're not spending as much on snow removal as you maybe thought. So you have a little savings there. Maybe you can move it to another area not doing well. So I think trend analysis and knowing where you are month to month. So I can take the budget and slice it down in my forecast and say, okay, I have 6 months in June. I can say I have 6 months worth of actuals and I have 6 months worth of forecast. So I'll know how the year is going to wind up. So knowing where you are in slicing and dicing and making sure your trends, how you're pacing in these trends, I look at that, and I think the trends are very, very important. During the 2008 auto crisis, we knew that a lot of the companies that have box seats and bought season tickets weren't going to be able to do that because they're borrowing money from the government. So the government is not going to allow them to buy season tickets from the NFL. So we knew that was going to change. So you got to prepare for that.
I love it. I love the trending analysis and that whole idea of being able to, pivot and leverage funds elsewhere. Another good reason to plan and to look at what you planned, even if it changed. I want to flip to John and talk about the nonprofit world. John, education, you're in education. When you talk about prioritizing goals, I mean, it's overwhelming what educators have to try to deliver on. How does the prioritization work there?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. There are 1,000,000,001 different things to focus on, and also 1,000,000,001 programs out there offering to support schools and districts on these problem areas, right? So ultimately, if we look at, what we do in education, it really is about student growth and achievement. Everything should revolve around that ultimately. And so you could think of it in terms of two tracks of goals. You have your academic goals and you have your operational goals, right? Or your social emotional goals, if you will. So, you have those goals as to, well, what are we going to need to do to particularly help students who are falling behind in their learning, partially because of COVID, So what are our academic goals? What do we want to see in the classroom? And then there are also those social emotional goals, again, highly impacted by COVID. And that's when you start looking at social emotional learning, attendance and truancy issues. So really, our work in, like I said, education is really about those two tracks, the academic. But I would argue any organization really look hard at what its ultimate goals are and then develop smart goals around ultimately what it wants to prioritize. Because again, especially in nonprofit, there are a lot of different programs and a lot of different ways in which you could go with what you do as an organization, the support you provide the community. But if you diffuse your impact across 100 programs, you might not have the same level of impact as you would if you focused on, say, 1 to 3 key programs that are actually going to help you solve the problem that you say you're solving.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think that applies nonprofit, for profit. It's about getting more focused as opposed to having too many things, right? Like you said, and then we're really not paying attention. I want to flip, because for the final 8 minutes of this, I'm going to go to a place that nobody in management wants to talk about, but I know that you 5 people will be comfortable talking about it. And that is that, for the last several years, we've just been trying to survive. So goal setting has probably been just try to maintain, just try to hang on. Okay. But every company now is like, we need to move forward. And I hear from a lot of managers out there, it's not a fear, but probably more like a dread of having to tell people, look, we need to step it up, because there is a lot of people out there pushing back, right? We've got, for a long time, they've said it's an employees market, and, people don't want to be overworked anymore, and they want their work to have purpose. And I'm hearing about a lot of managers feeling stressed out about saying, hey, these are our goals, and they need to be aggressive, and this is what they're going to be next year, because they just feel like people are going to say, no, I don't want to do it. It's too much. And we've never had that before. We've never, in the business world, people have never pushed back, but it's very much a thing. I think there can be, and there will be, depending on which company you're at, some collective pushback by staff who are going to say no. So I'm curious to all of you, what advice do you have for managers out there about making sure that the goals are accepted? And if you get that pushback, how do you envision dealing with it, right? And so, Mark, I'll hit on you first. What are you thinking? Where's your head at with respect to this, and how would you approach it?
Wow, thanks for handing it over to me first. Let me think. Look, there's a few things, JT, right? So one of my previous employers, the goals were actually linked to bonuses, right? So if you got 100% of your goals done, then you got all of your bonus. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there was a real connection there, right, between a goal and work.
Yeah.
So again, I'm you can see me looking into the ether, like trying to come up with an answer. But so there's a connection between the goal and work. And, if you want your bonus, you got to hit the goal.
Yeah.
So if you want the job, you got to hit the goal. Because, it is a free market out there.
Yeah.
Right? So you know what? I'm not going to do that goal for whatever those reasons may be. Okay. There will be somebody out there that will do that goal and deliver for me. And if you think about it, ultimately, my take is it's called work. It's not called a vacation.
Right.
You get paid money to do something. And again, I think that the issue that I had with the goals, it being a bonus, was always at the start of the year, how the heck do I know how the year will pan out?
Right.
And it was always very, very difficult at the end of the year when you've realized that you worked really hard for 11 and a half months, and then you look back at your goals that you wrote 11 and a half months ago and you've hardly hit any of them. And then you spent 2 or 3 weeks kind of frantically rushing around trying to tick boxes. Because you're in this point where it's like, I've worked really hard, and yet apparently I've got nothing to show for it because I've barely hit my goals.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I think it's a case of if those goals resonate, these goals are going to make a difference to the business, to the community, the economy, to me and my family. If they really resonate for me, then I'm going to hit the goals. And if they don't resonate for me, then that's when it becomes more difficult.
I agree 100%. And I think there are things that companies can do, like not make it an annual goal, maybe make it a quarterly goal, right? So, and allow for pivoting. But I think you went where I hoped this discussion would go, which is at some point we need to do it calmly and politely, but it is a business. We are setting the goals. If you align with the goals, great. If you don't, then maybe we need to find the person that does, right? And that, I know that that's really hard. People are, because there's been turnover and it's been difficult to find people, but businesses have got to start to structure themselves in a way that they can achieve what they want to achieve, and at the same time, they've got to figure out, can I get people to do that, right? And that's where this all seems to start to become pretty serious. I'm going to flip to Lisa. Lisa, what are your thoughts? You've got these goals, you need to meet them, and people aren't feeling it. What do you think?
I don't like I'm going to have a different take on this. I don't like how the review systems are right now. I don't think that they work. I really do like the OKRs and how they're set up, because I think they stretch organizations and they push companies, and it's a kind of an ongoing tracking system to say, how can we push an organization to get somewhere and think outside the box? Because when you confine somebody and say, you've got to do this, and it's tied to a performance and a money, I think you lose the creativity. If you can eliminate that and you can say, we've got to go here, let's open up the risk of failure and let people fail so that you can drive that creativity. That's what you want from an organization. You want to let people fail so you can learn and pivot and fail and learn and pivot, and you can drive that home run. And you can do it quickly. You can keep doing it and learn and go and learn and go, and then drive the performance on something else. Because if you're not performing, you need to get that person out of there quickly, right? And you need to identify that separately. But these goals and the OKRs, they're great for getting people to stretch and figure out how we can grow a company. And that's kind of where my head is at. It's like drive that innovation and get organizations to, the one thing that COVID did is teach organizations how to quickly pivot and meet a consumer's demand really quickly. So how do you keep that going? How do you keep that drive and innovation going?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think what I'm hearing from all of you, this is great stuff. We know we need to do the planning. We know we need to do the research. We need to have goals so people have something to work towards. But what I'm hearing from all of you is that what we don't need is for them to be overly structured, cast in stone, no opportunity to learn, grow, pivot, switch gears, whatever it is. They have to be flexible. They have to be fluid, no matter what. So yes, there needs to be business planning. Yes, there needs to be team goal setting. But in this day and age, there has to be so much flexibility to it. And I'm with you. I think we've learned that through the pandemic. What I think will be interesting is which companies will know how to do that and deliver on that in a way that gets their employees to buy into it, and behind it, because we're still hearing out there that there's this disconnect. And it will be really fascinating to see which companies can get this back on track, right? Can get be building something that employees are excited about pursuing and structured. I definitely think that's going to be one of the bigger challenges in 2023 for sure, which is huge. This was a great discussion. It went faster than I expected. I would have loved even more time with you all. So here's what I want to do. Just want to go around the table here and your final parting thoughts based on everything we said today. What do you think is the most important thing people should be thinking about when it comes to goal setting, team building, the planning for 2023? I will start with John.
So along the lines of what Mark was saying about what resonates with people, what do people gain by engaging in and participating in organizational goals, think of the 5 Ps. I tell teachers to think about this when they're trying to motivate students who don't necessarily want to learn or do what we want them to do. Now, people are motivated. Everyone's motivated, but what we're motivated is different, or what we're motivated by is different. So think people, prestige, play, power, and prizes. And figure out as an organization how you can show appreciation and staff in a multitude of ways.
Love it. I love it. That's a very cool thing with the 5 Ps. We're going to need to jot that one down. Michael, I'm going to jump to you.
I will say keep planning, keep watching those trends, and just keep going. Definitely.
Absolutely perfect. Mark, what about you?
I would say make sure that any task that is yours, again, you deliver on. So you hit the date, you hit quality, you hit completeness, everything. So that nobody can say you didn't do something. I do that. And then the other thing, again, is the self-prioritization. It's an art. But once I personally had found out how to do it, I actually really enjoyed it. It was kind of scratching an itch, right? It kind of felt uncomfortable at the same time you actually start to understand, who had the power, that day of the week, what actually made the company tick, what the real goals were, what the drivers were for senior management that may or may not have been what the actual goals were. You really start to kind of see behind the curtain. So hit all of your tasks, because then nobody can have an issue with that. And then, kind of enjoy finding out how work really works.
I love it. I love it. Anna, what about you?
I would say give the OKR framework a try. You're going to be surprised by what you can achieve with it. That would be number 1. Number 2, make sure that you understand and play and build on the strengths of your team. And then number 3, become more a coach leader than just a leader. Think about that approach. It's a very different approach than just dictating or imposing. Command and control is long gone. Coach is the best option to go, and make sure that people are, getting the buy-in and growing. That would be my sense.
So agree about no more command and control. Time to coach.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa?
I would say identify the one thing that is going to make the biggest impact in your company, your team, your brand, and make sure you get focused on that and make it happen. It'll have a huge impact at the end of the year, come next year.
I love that. Kind of like a North Star. Excellent. Amazing job, everybody. Here's what we're going to do really quickly. Can you please state your full name and tell them where they can find you? We'll start with John.
You can find me on LinkedIn. My name is John Shembari.
Wonderful. Michael?
Michael Willis, you can find me on LinkedIn.
Wonderful.
Thank
Mark?
LinkedIn too, Mark Taylor.
Excellent. Anna?
LinkedIn too, Anna Smith, talent strategist.
Wonderful. And Lisa?
Hi, Lisa Perry. You can find me on LinkedIn at Lisa Perry Marketing and TikTok at Brand Building.
Love it. Well done, my friends. Another episode in the books of Executive Table Talk. Folks, thank you for participating today. Hope to see you again next week. Remember, we're here every Thursday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, live on LinkedIn. Until next time, remember, if you want to win, you got to work it daily. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.